Back. All right, that's pretty good. All right, let me see. Get it back over. Ooh, we're still taping. We're taping now. Okay. So, hi, Mom.
Hi, Annie.
Hi there. We're going to do a little interview today. Today is Christmas Day, 2009, and we're up here at our house on Glade Park, Colorado. Paul is here, and you brought your nice little dog, Lacey. She's lying there, too. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and as I did with Dad, I'll suggest that you try not to ramble if you answer.
Okay.
Try and keep
Crisp, clear
to
answer.
the answer. Okay, so let me ask you a couple of preliminary questions. Where were you born and when?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, November 9th, 1928.
And where did you live?
When I was a
Where,
child?
where were your parents living when you were born?
In Chicago.
Right in Chicago. Whereabouts?
Chicago, Illinois. You know, I don't know our exact address
Okay.
at the time.
Okay. And what is your earliest memory in life? What's the first thing you can remember?
My very earliest memory is really quite an early one. I was about 15 or 16 months old. And I remember that my parents were taking pictures of me, and I kept crying because I wanted the camera.
And did you get it?
Nope. Who would give a 15-month-old a camera?
And that's a pretty early memory. That's really remarkable. What invention came about in your lifetime that most impressed you or made a big difference to you?
That would probably be an invention that occurred much later in my practice and ongoing, and that was the new imaging that they have, getting pictures inside bodies.
Do you mean X-rays or you mean the later versions?
The later
magnetic
versions,
resonance imaging?
MRIs and CTs.
Which one of those most impressed you?
I think at this point MRIs.
Okay. And do you remember your grandparents? Were they in your life at all?
Both my grandmothers were dead before I was born. I saw my paternal grandfather maybe once or twice in my life when I was very young. My paternal grandfather, I do remember, he was older and he was sick, and he lived with us when we lived in Gilman, Illinois. I was somewhere between 10 and 15 when we lived there.
How old were you when you moved to Gilman?
I was 10 or 11 when we moved to Gilman.
And what did your parents do there?
My father was the director of a public health district, and Gilman was centrally located for his district, and that's why he picked that. Very small
Was
town.
it a county?
It was 6 counties.
Oh,
His
I see.
district was
I
6
see.
counties.
They would lump several counties together, and he looked over the public health in 6 counties. Wow, that's a big job. And was your mother employed at the time?
My mother drove for my father. He hated to drive.
That's interesting. As I recall, she used to pull over and stop when the light was green, so that she would know when it turned red, and she'd drive up to the red light and stop.
Did she do that when you were around?
I just remember that kind of crazy driving.
She was a better driver by then.
Yeah, so she drove your dad, and so did your dad make a pretty good living doing this?
No,
didn't
it was
pay
a
very well?
state-paid job, and they were pretty bad.
And then you said your dad had a stroke at a certain point in his life?
He had a stroke at the age of 46.
What was his full name?
Abraham Judah Avraham, actually. It's a Hebrew pronunciation because he was born over there. Avraham Judah Levy.
Okay. He didn't have. Let's see. I thought the J was for Joseph. No.
No, Judah.
Judah. Okay, and that's where I got my initials from.
Mm-hmm.
AJ. Okay. And how old was he when he had that stroke?
He was 46 when he had the first one. He had another one when he was about 48.
Wow, that's young.
And he could no longer travel to 6 counties after that.
That's very young.
He was in World War II, and he had an injury on his left side. He lost his left foot. The only thing that remained was the heel, and he had to wear a special shoe that helped him walk.
Wow.
And his left hand was mangled.
Who was he fighting for in World War II? For the Americans?
He was fighting with the British.
Really?
Whom he hated.
Where was he stationed?
In the Middle East.
Wow. Wow. And then at what age did he die?
He died at 52.
Of what?
He
Stroke?
had a heart attack.
52. Really young.
And that was back in the days when they didn't know what to do for heart attacks.
Where did he die? Where was he?
He died in Dixon, Illinois. When I was a senior in high school, we moved to Dixon. My parents actually gave me the choice. My father was offered a job at either one of 2 state hospitals where they were in the midst of epidemics of one sort or another. One was Chicago State, and the other one was Dixon. And my parents asked me which one they should pick. And Chicago State, I just had connotations of being a state hospital. But it was the first time I'd ever heard of Dixon, so I picked Dixon.
Oh, so they wanted you to be happy. You give a choice in it, and then you go with them.
It was my last year at home, actually.
Uh-huh.
My last year in high school.
Wow. And you told me, was your dad in a wheelchair before he died?
No.
No, he was up.
He was still walking.
So he died suddenly?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's pretty sad.
He had chest pain, and he called my mother, and she went and walked him home. We lived right on the grounds of the state hospital, so it wasn't a long walk. And he died within an hour or 2.
Of having the chest pains. What year was that?
1949. It was 3 weeks before I started medical school.
And Grandma came to live with us when?
When we lived in California.
We were on Martel. That's when she moved in with us, right?
Yeah.
When we moved into that house. So was that 62?
63.
63. And what year did she die?
71.
And she died of a stroke, results of a stroke?
She had bleeding. They were treating her for a stroke, and they were giving her anticoagulants, and she started bleeding from an internal
I remember
artery.
her being in a nearby convalescent hospital.
Yeah.
On La Brea? Do you remember where?
I believe it was on La Brea, near Melrose, I think.
So she had the stroke and then was treated for the bleeding in the hospital, then went to the convalescent hospital?
No, she died in the hospital.
So
they transferred her from the nursing home to the hospital, and she died there.
And where was she buried?
In Chicago.
And near your dad?
Both my parents are buried in Chicago.
Do you know the cemetery?
Oak Lawn, I think it's called.
Oak Lawn. And your dad had multiple degrees, isn't that right?
Yeah, my father's first degree was in Semitic languages.
A PhD? What level degree?
PhD at Johns Hopkins. And while he was doing that, he delved into some Egyptian papyri having to do with medicine. And his advisor suggested that he go to medical school and come back to the papyri with the knowledge of medicine and translate them. So he went to medical school at Northwestern, And after he graduated, he became interested in public health and got a Doctor of Public Health degree at Johns Hopkins.
No small feat.
No, not Johns Hopkins. It was Yale.
So this was 3 years of medical school.
4.
4 years
4
of
years
medical
of
school.
medical school.
He probably had how many years postgraduate to get the degree in Semitic languages?
Must have been at least 3.
3 years, and then the
4
public
years
health
of medical school.
degree.
Public health was 2 years.
2 years. So all that education, and then he died so early. That's sad. Wow. So he seems like, by all accounts, a brilliant guy.
He was very brilliant.
And how was his personality? Was he? Did he have a good sense of humor? Was he serious?
He was serious, and he was somewhat brusque. When I'd express an opinion, he'd often tell me I didn't know what I was talking about.
And
but both my parents wanted a boy, and they never got one.
Did you feel unloved?
Well, I felt kind of unwanted.
But it sounds like they
my
were good
mother
parents.
let me know in no uncertain terms that she didn't want a girl.
Wow.
Many times.
Wow. So why didn't they have another child?
My mother never got pregnant again.
And they didn't want to adopt?
No. People didn't adopt much in those days. Only if their backs were against the wall.
All right. Okay. So
and
then what year did you go to medical school?
I started in 1949.
And that was 4 years?
53. And I did an internship at a smaller hospital on the south side of Chicago because they paid $200 a month, which was a lot for an internship in those days.
So you felt pretty good doing that.
And we needed the money pretty badly. Well, I was married by that time. I was married while I was in medical
What year
school.
did you and Dad get married?
1951.
And you were married 10 years?
11.
11 years. Where did you get married?
We got married in Chicago at in the living room of the rabbi that married us, and I don't even remember his name.
Do you remember why a living room, not a temple?
We didn't belong to a temple.
You could save money.
And it didn't cost anything to get married in the living room.
Okay, and how many people were there? Do you remember what your wedding was like?
Just Dan's parents and my mother.
I never saw any photos. Do you have any photos of?
No.
No.
There was no photographer there. There were no pictures taken.
Any gifts?
We got gifts later.
Did you go on a honeymoon?
We came to Los Angeles, and I guess the drive there
was the honeymoon.
The honeymoon.
Okay.
And
Did
his parents had a reception for us.
Oh.
I think more because they needed to do it from a business point of view. And that was an occasion.
Did you wear a wedding dress?
No.
What did you wear?
I wore a suit, a top and a skirt. And I think it was blue.
What did Dad wear?
A suit.
Were there any flowers?
Actually, a jacket, a sports jacket, and a pair of pants.
No
flowers.
No tie? Dad didn't have a tie?
He probably wore a tie. He hated ties.
So no flowers, no gifts, no photography.
That's right.
That explains why we've never seen any photos or seen any wedding gear around the house. Right. No plates or linens or anything. So pretty austere wedding.
Yeah.
Because?
Well, we had to pay for it. We had no money. Our parents were supporting us.
What did Dad's parents think of that? I mean, they had some money, didn't they? They're putting him through law school.
Yeah, well, they were putting him through law school rather reluctantly.
So they were not...
When they didn't like what he was doing politically, they'd stop paying his tuition. So
but did they offer to contribute anything to your wedding?
We didn't ask them to.
Didn't. Okay. Okay. All right. What have you done in your lifetime that you're most proud of?
My children.
Don't be like Dad. You're just doing what Dad said.
Well, becoming a doctor.
I think that's
I loved it.
a good accomplishment.
It was good.
Okay,
I couldn't believe they were paying me to be a doctor when I first went to work.
that must have been a good feeling.
It was too much fun.
What advice do you have for me in my life?
You don't need any advice.
Come on.
You do things your way.
Dish
anyway.
something out.
And you do a very good job
You can think of something.
You've done a very good job of your life. You don't need advice from me.
How about for Steve? You have any advice for Steve?
He's done a good job in his life, too.
How about Paul? Any advice for Paul?
Paul has done a good job.
So there's nothing we could do better?
Nope.
What's your biggest accomplishment?
Outside of having my kids?
Outside of having kids.
I think becoming a doctor.
Okay, so that's the thing you're most proud of and your biggest accomplishment. Is there, if there's one thing in your life that you could go back and change, what would it be?
I think that I've always regretted not going into a fellowship on infectious diseases because I really love infectious diseases.
Even if you could have been infected?
Yeah. That isn't all it does, you know.
And how would you best like people to remember you?
I think that I'm a fairly good person. That's about it.
That appears to be the
I
case.
may have accomplished something in my life.
That appears to be the case from what everyone tells me about you who knows you, so can't argue with that. Is there, do you have any big regret in life that you would do over again differently if you had a
I
chance?
think I answered that with it.
Oh, one thing if you could change. What would it be? You said degree in infectious.
Yeah, I think
infectious
that's
disease.
probably it. I think that's
the
something
one.
that
So
I would
you
like to have done.
just never got all the education that you wanted to.
Yeah, well, I guess you could call it that.
Okay. Is there anything that we left out that you'd like to add? Something you want us to know about you?
I don't think so, but if I think of something later, can you reopen this thing?
I think I can add to it.
Okay.
Okay. All right then. Thank you for sitting for this interview on this lovely Christmas day,
You're welcome.
2009.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.